Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. My name is Bryson Carver. Got a great show for you guys tonight. Now, I'll tell you what, getting closer and closer. Got a couple play-in games. I'm going to react to one of them to start the show. Of course, the Brooklyn Nets beating the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'll discuss that, as well as the Baker Mayfield podcast interview that everybody's talking about. He is, man, I mean, the guy doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. And I'll discuss that a little later in the show. As well as Ben Simmons. I said on Monday's show there was a 0% chance that he was going to play on, in the playoffs for Brooklyn. According to sources, probably is going to suit up in the first round. But I'm here to tell you, horrible move. Horrible move by the Nets. Horrible move for Ben Simmons. I'll discuss that. As well as everybody's kind of clowning Patrick Beverley for his celebration at the end of the Timberwolves Play-In win over the Clippers. I freaking loved it. Like, genuinely, I loved it. And I'll discuss that later in the show. As well as I did this for the NFL playoffs, and everybody seemed to like it. I enjoyed doing it anyway. So I'm going to do this for the NBA. So we're going in the playoffs. So 16 NBA playoff teams. I'm going to include the one team from either conference because we got 2 playing games left, one from either conference. So basically 18 teams, why they won't win a championship. Obviously, we know one of these 18 teams is going to be hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy, of course. But what would be the biggest reason that they would not do so? So I'll do that at the end of the show today. I'm really looking forward to you guys seeing that because at the end of the day, look, there's no team is perfect. And I think the playoffs certainly expose that more than 82 games of the regular season. That's just how it works. But first, let's discuss the Brooklyn Nets, who showed up against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I picked them to cover I think it was an 8.5-point spread. I think by tip-off, it went up to 9.5. If it had went to that, I don't know if I'd have jumped on that. But nevertheless, the Nets did what they were supposed to do. They beat the Cleveland Cavaliers. They are officially now in the postseason, and they're going to take on the Boston Celtics. And I got to admit to y'all, after watching that game on Tuesday night, I actually got a little discouraged for the Brooklyn Nets, and here's why. You look at what the Nets did on Tuesday night against Cleveland. You look at Kyrie Irving. I mean, come on. What did he make his first 13 shots, I think it was, which if I'm not mistaken, if it were technically the playoffs, because play-in stats don't count for the playoffs, not sure why, but they don't, Kyrie Irving would have the record for the most shots made to start a game in playoff history, if this game counted for a playoff game. And Kyrie did his thing. Listen, he looks like Cavs Kyrie. So it looks like, he looked like Uncle Drew. Remember Uncle Drew, the movie he did and the Pepsi commercials? I think it was Pepsi. But Kyrie looked like Uncle Drew last night, right? He went out there, dropped 34 points, was efficient as flip, 12 for 15 from the field, 3 for 6 from 3. And it's not bad to shoot 80% from the field and 50% from three-point range. Doesn't get more efficient than that, folks. And then, of course, he did what he always does. He went 7 for 7 for the free throw line. And then Kevin Durant looks like Kevin Durant. He scored only 25. He only took 16 shots, but the dude's freaking lethal. And, by the way, what KD did do in this game was while Kyrie was, making all the shots, KD was getting everybody else involved. Like, KD really is a better, quote-unquote, point guard than Kyrie Irving is. I said this when James Harden was on the Nets. James is the point guard, not Kyrie. Like, James was listed as the shooting guard. Kyrie is the point guard. I'm like, no, just swap those because they play different ways. And KD, I think, had 11 assists on Tuesday night as well and played excellent interior defense. Kind of reminded me from his second year in Golden State. He was like top 5 in the league in blocks. Like, that's what he looked like on Tuesday night. Those two were out of this world. But when I looked down at the Nets roster, wasn't quite as impressed. And now Bruce Brown played well, but it was an efficient 18 points he scored. Right? Seth Curry has not just last night, in general. Seth Curry over the last couple of weeks, and I'm a fan of the Curry clan, right? Steph's my guy. Steph's my favorite player in the history of the game. But Seth, horrible. 0 for 4 from the field. All 4 of those shots were from three-point range. Did not score a point. Okay, this is one of the guys they got in the James Harden trade. He's got to step up and be better than he was. You look down the list at the bench. Outside of Nick Claxton, who was 6 for 6, you got 9 points from the rest of the bench. From Goran Dragic, who is old and does not even look like the Miami Goran Dragic, much less the Phoenix Goran Dragic. And Patty Mills, who, you know I love Patty Mills. The guy shows up all the time in the playoffs. 3 points, I believe. Yeah, 3 points? No, I'm sorry. He scored 6 and Claxton scored 3. So that's my concern for the Brooklyn Nets. And by the way, Cleveland got back in that basketball game in the fourth quarter. And this is without Jared Allen, who reportedly, I saw a tweet earlier, reportedly is going to try and give it a go. He's 50-50, according in his own words, to play on Friday in the elimination game against Atlanta. That's going to be phenomenal. I'm probably favoring Cleveland right now, but, we'll see how it plays out and how it transpires. But regardless, Cleveland's missing their big man. Darius Garland looks great. He was an all-star for a reason, averaged 21 a game. Kevin Love was good. And so Cleveland makes this furious rally. Remember, they're down 20 after the first quarter, 40-20. Brooklyn doubled them up. And they let Cleveland back in the game because, again, Brooklyn is not a great defensive team. They went up in the defensive rankings a bit to about 14th, I think it was, in defensive rating. So they improved over the last week or so of the regular season. So that's a good sign if you're a Brooklyn Nets fan. But is it sustainable in the playoffs? And again, I'll discuss Ben Simmons later in the show. Certainly he would help, you would think, defensively. But this is not going to be a team that locks you down, and that's kind of the concern for the Nets that you don't have with other contenders, such as, say, the Suns or the Bucks. Or, heck, Miami's kind of the opposite, right? Miami can lock you down for 40 of the 48 minutes of the game, maybe more than that. But if Tyler Hero's got a cold hand and Jimmy Butler's not making his mid-range shots and, guys like PJ Tucker and, say, Victor Oladipo is out of rhythm, he scored 40 in the regular season finale, so we'll see what we get from him. Like, Miami's the opposite of Brooklyn. Like, if Brooklyn's offense isn't going, which is rare, they can't stop you. And they went through a little lull there in the fourth quarter, and this is Cleveland, who's a good basketball team. Again, I'm giving them the edge right now to beat Atlanta to get in the playoffs. But Cleveland, newsflash, ain't Boston. Okay? If Brooklyn beats Boston, Cleveland ain't Milwaukee. So, credit to the Nets for doing what they were supposed to do. No question about it. But I just left that game sort of with an empty feeling. Like, okay, Kyrie was the best player on the floor. KD was phenomenal. And they won by single digits at home over a beat-up fringe playoff team? And you can't tell me that wasn't a game that Brooklyn, got out of bed ready to go play. Because at the end of now, some of it, obviously, you had the shooting in Brooklyn that morning, which, thank God almighty, that there are no life-threatening injuries. So maybe that shook up the team a little bit, understandably so, because I think the spot of the area of the shooting was like half a mile or something crazy away from the practice facility. So you can understand why that would shake a team up and shake a city up for that matter. Maybe that played factor. I'm not sure. But I just felt like in the fourth quarter, outside of those two, it just felt flat. And again, Boston is a different animal. Now, Robert Williams is out. And again, I'm going to discuss my playoff weaknesses for every NBA playoff team later in the show. You don't want to miss it. That's going to be key for Boston. But Jason Tatum can go toe-to-toe with Kevin Durant. We've seen it multiple times over the last couple of seasons. Saw it last year in the playoffs when Tatum dropped 50 on the Nets in Game 3 of that series. Jaylen Brown is going to be back this year. He wasn't there last year. Marcus Smart may be the defensive player of the year. Ime Udoka has this team playing lockdown defense. Now, there's nothing you can do to stop Kevin Durant. There's nothing you can do to stop Kyrie Irving. But what about the other guys? I hear Shaquille O'Neal say it all the time on TNT. The others. If the others don't show up, you're not going to win. You're simply not going to win. So, again, congrats to Brooklyn. Obviously, I'd be ripping them. You guys out there would be ripping them if they had lost this game. So they took care of business. They did what they were supposed to do. But I would almost argue it was the top two guys who showed up to the party, and defensively, everybody else was especially in the second half and especially in the fourth quarter. John, my man John Rivera, Fan Perspective Podcast. Go check them out. He's in the comments. He says Brooklyn in 6. So this is like the one series I've kind of decided in my head for the most part. I'm going to make my first round predictions tomorrow, so definitely don't want to miss that. This is, I think, the one series. Well, there's another series I could think of, but this is like the one series where I'm still kind of undecided on, because I can't ignore the fact, that Kevin Durant last year against the Milwaukee Bucks, with no Kyrie Irving and James Harden being, well, James Harden in the playoffs, which isn't good. KD went out there and just flat out put the Nets on his back against the Bucks, who ended up winning the championship. Now, Boston, I think, has the horses on both sides of the floor to go win a championship. I really do believe that. I think they're a contender. Didn't think that going the All-Star break, but I do now. But when you look at Boston defensively, this feels a little bit, and I was thinking about this the other day, just to hear me out on this. This feels a little bit like last year in the Western Conference, the 2 seed versus 7 seed matchup. Remember the Los Angeles Lakers, defending NBA champions? LeBron James, Anthony Davis, good supporting cast, decent coach. Certainly, I think any you Laker fans who still don't like Frank Vogel, you take him over Steve Nash. I'm not huge on Steve Nash as an NBA head coach. Love Steve Nash as a player. Not as high on him as an NBA head coach, but that's neither here nor there. Lakers, solid team. They had injuries throughout the season. They're in the play-in tournament. They survived my Warriors in the play-in game at home. They get in the playoffs. Everybody has the Lakers. I had the Lakers. You had the Lakers. Everybody outside of Phoenix, Arizona had the Lakers beating the Suns. Lost in 6 games. Well, Anthony Davis got hurt. Yeah, but Anthony Davis always gets hurt. You had to see this coming from a mile away. It'd be different if it was, kind of an Iron Man type player going down. Say it was like a Mikal Bridges or something, right? Mikal Bridges has played every single game since he came into the NBA. He hasn't missed a game. Like if Mikal Bridges went down for the Suns, you'd be like, wow, that came out of nowhere. That's different. AD always gets hurt. And so and I hate that I'm even having to talk about the Lakers, but the Suns were the better basketball team in that series. Better coach, better supporting cast, better defense, home court advantage. This feels a little bit like this. Now, who are the 2 best players in that Lakers-Suns series? Both of them played for LA. Heck, Chris Paul was beat up in that series. Remember, he had that shoulder injury in game 1, and it didn't take until like midway through the second round for him to kind of really regain his rhythm back. Devin Booker had to carry them in that game 6 win. This is feeling a little bit Suns-Lakers-ish from last year. I can see why people pick Brooklyn, because KD and Kyrie are so lethal, and because both have an extensive history of showing up in the playoffs, and both are, of course, NBA champions. Excuse me. But I worry about them defensively. I worry about Steve Nash versus Ime Udoka. Yeah, I'm definitely giving the advantage to Boston there. Depth, Boston. Home court, obviously, that's Boston. And by the way, Kyrie, he struggled. I think the whole Boston Demons thing has kind of gotten his head a little bit. Right? Remember, earlier this season, he came back and the Celtics fans were booing him, and he had some comment like, it's like it's, going back to your ex-girlfriend's house or something like that. I don't know. So I think the Boston thing does get in Kyrie's head a little bit. So maybe that factors as well. I'm just going to be interested to see how it plays out over the next couple of weeks, because I think it's going to be a fascinating series. If you had to ask me right now, and I'll make my prediction tomorrow, if you had to ask me right now, I'm leaning Celtics. I think it's 7 games either way. Brooklyn, Boston, I can't see it ending in 6 or less. I really can't. I think we're going to see a game 7 at the TD Garden or whatever it's called in Boston, and we're going to have ourselves a heck of a basketball game decided in the last 5 minutes. But I don't know. I'm not as high today on Brooklyn as everybody else seems to be, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Let's move on. Our only NFL topic of the day, unless we get some sort of breaking news story. Who knows? We got a lot of those in March. There's no question about that. So who knows? But one guy who's been in the news quite a bit in the National Football League is one Baker Mayfield. Now, obviously, Baker, drafted by the Browns, 2018, number 1 overall out of the University of Oklahoma. Had a great rookie season. Actually, one of the better rookie seasons that we've seen in recent memory. Awful second year. Really good third year in 2020, getting the Browns to the playoffs and winning a playoff game. And then this year, disaster. Worst year of his career. Well, second worst year. 2019 was pretty horrible. But, there were 3 busts. There were 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round in the 2018 NFL draft. 5 quarterbacks. Okay. It was Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, Lamar Jackson. 2 of them, home runs. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. We know that. By the way, Ravens, give Lamar Jackson his money. Please give him his money. But those 2 are, we know what they are. Lamar's won an MVP. Josh Allen's a top 5 quarterback in the league. Okay. And then you have your bust of the bust, Josh Rosen, who, is just fighting just to stay in the league, just to be on practice squad teams. And then you got your 2 other busts, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold. It's fair to say Sam Darnold's a bust. Okay. I was willing to give him a shot in Carolina. He was awful. He's a bust. Okay. But what you see here is a difference. And this is I think the defining factor in determining whether a guy is a franchise quarterback. If you have 2, similar guys, similar in talent, production, because last year, Darnold was awful. Baker was awful. Nobody disputes that. I've heard literally no discussions about the Panthers possibly moving on from Sam Darnold. They may draft a quarterback this year. Do they take Malik Willis? Do they take Kenny Pickett? Who knows? I'm hearing the stock on the kid from Cincinnati is really rising right now. Do they take him? Maybe. But as of right now, no discussions on moving on from Sam Darnold. Because the guys in that locker room, they did it with the New York Jets. They do in Carolina. They like him. Right? Good dude. Solid leadership intangibles. Now, if you had to put them on a lie detector test and say, would they like a different quarterback? Duh. Of course they would. But you don't have dudes in that locker room pushing the organization to get rid of him. In Cleveland, you have a split locker room when Odell Beckham Jr. was released. Matter of fact, reports are that more than half the locker room was on Odell's side, not Baker's. Baker Mayfield on a podcast this week, or I think it was probably recorded, a couple of weeks ago, as most podcasts are. But Baker Mayfield was talking about his impending free agency, trade, stock, whatever, and the YNK podcast with Mike. That's what the podcast is called. But Baker Mayfield told Mike, quote, I feel disrespected 100%. I was told one thing and they completely did another. This was asked after he was asked, why he was, if he was disrespected or not. He said, quote, when people are so critical, I would love to show up at somebody's cubicle and just boo the you-know-what out of them and watch them crumble. I'd be lying to you if I didn't say I got caught up in all the negativity and stuff during the year last year. That's so, yeah. How do I get the best out of people who are making a ton of money? That last comment sounds like a shot at Odell, personally. That's what I took that as. Because there's some high-paid players in the Browns, but Odell was kind of like the guy, right? They trade for him in 2019, and that's when everybody, bought stock in the Cleveland Browns for 2019. I didn't for one. I said they'd go 6-10. They went 6-10, but everybody was all in the Cleveland Browns in 2019. And Odell's a big reason for that, right? Because he had signed that deal, and of course, the chemistry between him and Baker, it just flat out never materialized. So that last comment, again, I'll repeat it. How can I get the best out of people who are making a ton of money? Why are you throwing the money aspect into it? That seems like really, really specific. But to go back to his point, he talked about he doesn't like getting booed. Okay, I got no problem with that. I get it. I get it. Nobody likes to get booed. But then he goes further. When people are so critical, I'd love to show up at somebody's cubicle and boo the you-know-what out of them and watch them crumble. Reason number 457 why Baker Mayfield is not a franchise quarterback. Talent factors, yes. No question. You got to be talented. But at the end of the day, this guy don't get it. He doesn't get it. Okay? And for all the Baker defenders out there, well, that's just how he is. He's got a chip on his shoulder. Great. I want my athletes to have a chip on their shoulder. That's why I can't stand Ben Simmons. That's why I criticize Simmons the way I do on this show. I want you to have a little edge. Love it. But Baker takes it to a whole new level. Snarky, taking shots at people, still taking shots at teammates, burning bridges. That's what he does. He's been doing this. Remember he went the whole Duke Johnson thing a couple of years ago. Remember Duke Johnson, that running back for the Browns? And because Duke Johnson was like third on the running back depth chart behind Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, Duke Johnson's like, hey, I'd like to be traded elsewhere. I'd like to get an opportunity to play. Yeah, I get that. Okay? And if I'm Baker, I'm not thrilled. But Baker went, dissed him to the media, talked about he wasn't loyal and all that. It's like, dude, just back off. It's fine. Don't worry about that. This shouldn't concern you. This shouldn't bring you to the point of dissing your own teammate to the media. I mean, how many? I mean, he's dissed coaches. Remember, he took shots at Stefanski this year, and reportedly Stefanski got really irritated with him towards the end. I mean, when there's always a controversy surrounding you, common denominator. That's what I said about Urban Meyer for years. Every time there's a controversy around Urban Meyer, it's like, oh, this is just, and I say, there's always a controversy with Urban Meyer. This is who he is. Maya Angelou, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. This is who Baker is. So, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Johnson said, trust me, they tried, LOL. I guess he's talking about the Browns trying to, or the Jets or the Panthers trying to move off of Sam Darnold. Yeah, I mean, like I said, they're both busts. But that's the difference between Sam and Baker. Like, if Sam Darnold's on the market, you're not going to have a ton of suitors, clearly, after how he's played since coming into the league. But the one thing about Sam that they can get that they can get from Sam that they can't get from Baker, they can trust how he handles himself. That may not seem like much, may not, but you know this is why I love quarterbacks like Brady, Wilson. This is why I love Derek Carr. That's why Derek Carr just got a huge contract extension. By the way, hats off to my man Derek Carr. Congratulations. This is why they get contract extensions like this. Organization can trust them. Are they talented? Clearly. Absolutely. Now, Dak and Derek Carr on Russell and Tom's level, of course. But then you have Aaron Rodgers going off and talking about, quoting MLK when talking about his vax status and taking shots at his family. And it's like, dude, just rein it back in. Rein it back in. Quarterback is the only position in sports where you really can't say much controversial at all. You really can't. Is it fair? It's probably not fair because at the end of the day, we've all said stuff we probably wish we wouldn't have said. You know, quarterbacks are held to a different standard, but guess what? That's how it works. That's how it works. So if you too much, to whom much is given, much is required. When you're in that position, what you do when you're at that position matters. Baker still does not get it. And so he's so shocked that teams aren't going after him. You're doing it to yourself. How you managed your injury last year was irresponsible, which credit to Baker in the podcast. I'm going to be fair on this. Baker did admit as such. He said, I did not manage the injury well. I should not have came back when I did. I should have, waited for the shoulder to heal. But does Baker think this is boosting his stock? Does he? This is, he don't get it. He really doesn't. It's like, it's like in that Cam Newton interview the other day. Like, I remember we were just watching. I'm like, man, Cam still don't get it. He still ain't learned from the 2017 incident with the female reporter. Baker still don't get it. But why should we be surprised? I just think at the end of the day, when there are other quarterbacks on the market, when there are, I mean, the Browns go out and take one of the biggest risks in the NFL in getting Deshaun Watson. You realize how, I mean, I understood it. I supported it, but it's a huge risk for legal reasons. The fact that, does he get suspended this year? Does he not? I'm hearing conflicting reports on that. You know, how does the fan base take it? Like, it's iffy. Like, Baker, you pretty much, in terms of his production, for the most part, you know what you're getting. Baker will have like one game a year where he looks phenomenal, one game where he looks like he shouldn't even be in the NFL, and then a bunch of games in between. You know, 197 yards passing, you know, a touchdown, a pick, and, you know, a solid passer rating, or QBR, I should say. And then he's aided by the running game. Like, that's what a typical Cleveland Browns box score looks like. Baker, 18 for 26, 197 yards, one touchdown, one interception. You know, and then you look at the Browns rushing yards, they rush for 141. That's usually what it looks like in a Browns, especially in a Browns win, because the running game, we all know, drives them. But I'm telling you, saying you would want to go into to somebody's cubicle and boo them, really? He's like a child. I mean, I've never been a huge fan of booing. I have to confess, I have booed in my life. I haven't done it in years, and I don't intend to do it anytime in the future. I'm not a fan of booing. I mean, I don't like it. And I get the humanity aspect of it for Baker not wanting to be booed. I get that. I totally get that. Now, if he's mad at the fans for being frustrated, then, you know, look yourself in the mirror. But, you know, you want to go to somebody's work and boo, like, come on. Like, Russell Wilson doesn't say that. Brady doesn't say that. Mahomes doesn't say that. Allen doesn't say that. Lamar doesn't say that. The elite court, Burrow doesn't say that. Come on, dude. Just cut it out. Cut it out. Please. You're hurting yourself. I don't want to see anybody like hurt their shots, hurt their shot at, you know, making a lot of money. That's what Baker's doing. He's hurting himself. It's only on him. Let's move to, again, I briefly mentioned Ben Simmons in our first two topics. Let's dive right into Ben Simmons for the second straight show. Now, I have to confess I was wrong on Monday. I said there's a 0% chance Ben Simmons comes back this year. Well, I was wrong because multiple reports are saying that Ben Simmons could return in the first round series against the Celtics in between games 4 through 6. Obviously, if there's a game 5 or a game 6, you know, he have a chance to play in that one. Obviously, there'll be a game 4. This is a terrible mistake for the Brooklyn Nets, however. Terrible. Because what you are going to do, because we know Ben Simmons is not, you know, in terms of his, you know, his mental state in playing the game, we know it's not in a good spot. We talk about Baker damaging himself. The Nets are doing this to Ben Simmons. You know me, I'm not a Ben Simmons fan. This is on the Nets. Because putting Ben Simmons out there 10 months after last playing an NBA basketball game, he hasn't played in 10 months. The stiff back, reportedly it's getting better. That's great. But just throwing him into the middle of the playoffs with a team that's trying to win a championship. Good luck. This isn't going to work. And you lose spacing, you know, for KD and Kyrie. Because, I mean, what do they do in Brooklyn? What do? They go ISO. They usually with Kyrie. Kyrie's in the corner. They clear everybody out, and he goes to work. Well, if Ben Simmons is on the perimeter, you can have an extra guy come and help. Now, maybe you could put Simmons in the opposite corner, put him on weak side. But the defense completely shifts when they know that there is a guy who not just can't shoot, refuses to shoot. Russell Westbrook could use a little bit of Ben Simmons in him. But that's how it goes. So now the one thing Simmons can provide is some presence defensively. You know, that's my number one concern with the Nets. That he will absolutely help with. But Ben Simmons, and I said this with LeBron and Westbrook, why it wouldn't work, because neither guys are good off the ball. Ben Simmons is good off the ball. Kyrie is. KD is. Patty Mills is. You know, you look at Bruce Brown is solid without the ball. You know, Bruce Brown is probably 6'3", plays like he's 6'9". Right? He's a very physical player. I mean, what are you going to do offensively? What's Steve Nash put in this position going to do with Ben Simmons? Are they doing it to prove a point just to get him out there? Is he healthy? Just ease him back into the rhythm. And it's hard to do that in the playoffs. Just think about this. Why did the NBA in 2020 with the bubble? Why did they, have these guys, have these players play some preseason games, like quote unquote preseason games before the 8 seeding games before the playoffs? They needed to get the rhythm back a little bit. Practice alone isn't going to do it. As the old saying goes, the best way to get in basketball shape or football shape or any sports shape is to play that sport. You want to get basketball shape, play basketball. But you can't simulate playoff intensity. Now, Ben Simmons knows what that's like. He's been in the playoffs, I think, for the last 5 years up until this year. Because 2020, the Sixers made the playoffs, but Simmons was hurt, so he didn't play. But he knows what that's like. He knows that intensity's like. But you're going to have road crowds are going to be all over him. The home crowd is going to be at the very least skeptical about him. He hurts the offensive flow because he's not good off the ball. I mean, Brooklyn would basically kind of have to change their whole offense, because if you have Simmons bringing it up the floor, then are you going to have sort of a free-flowing offense with Kyrie and Kevin Durant? That could work, maybe. I think that can actually work. But are they going to completely change the way they do offense in, 2 days in between Game 3 and Game 4? No. Or Game 4 and Game 5, depending on when he comes back? There's just nothing about this that makes sense in any way, shape, or form. So this feels a little bit desperate on the part of Brooklyn. It does, because I think they can beat Boston. I'm leaning Boston, but they can beat Boston without Simmons. Absolutely. I like I said in the first topic, if you told me that the Nets are going to beat the Celtics, I'd be like, oh yeah, I could see that. I could see that. Now I can't see the Nets beating Milwaukee, but they don't need Simmons for this first round. But again, just to throw him in the playoffs, that's why I don't think the Clippers should play Kawhi. There's some reports that maybe he goes, maybe he does. It's like, no. I get you want to try and go all in for a championship if the Clippers, just if you get in the playoffs, you got to beat, the Pelicans to do that. But don't throw Kawhi into the playoffs. You want to get some games, you want to get his legs underneath him, be able to get loose. I mean, that's why when a player comes off an injury, they're on a minutes restriction. Ease them back in. And we all know a regular season game in February is not a playoff game, not even close. The only thing even somewhat similar to a postseason-like atmosphere is Christmas. And that's changing a little bit. So I just think this is a horrendous idea by whoever's making this decision, Nets upper management, the medical staff, Steve Nash, whoever's making this call is doing Ben Simmons a disservice, and I think they're doing the Brooklyn Nets a disservice. And I actually think this would hurt their chances at possibly going out and winning a championship, or at least competing for a championship this season. It just feels rushed. It feels really, really rushed. I don't like it. And plus, has Simmons overcome the demons from last year? We've all seen the meme. Everybody's seen the meme. Remember that camera angle from Game 7 last year when the Sixers are playing the Hawks, where little 6'1" at best Trae Young is standing right underneath the basket. So basically no interior presence, and Simmons has the angle, wide open layup, heck, wide open dunk. He could posterize Trae Young if he wanted to. And he passes the ball when the rim is right there, uncontested. Has he gotten over that? Didn't he have a game this past playoffs, or maybe a couple games, where he took 4 shots? I think this could mess with him a little bit. So I don't like this at all. And does Ben Simmons come in motivated? I mean, that's got to be the topic of question as well. No question about it. I just don't think this works. Moving on, though, this guy, Patrick Beverley. I'll tell you what, man. Patrick Beverley, he is one of the sports cliches, especially in basketball, is you'd hate to play against him, but you'd love to have him on your team. Patrick Beverley fits that mold literally to a T. So the Timberwolves beat the Clippers. I picked the Clippers to win, but the Timberwolves got it done. Hats off to them. They're in the playoffs for only the second time since 2004 and the first time since 2018. They're going to take on the Memphis Grizzlies. That will be a fascinating series. I'm definitely leaning Memphis, but I just think that'll be a very fun series without a question. They won the game 109-104. It was very entertaining, not just an entertaining game, but entertaining television. Because, I know you had I think, was it late first quarter, early second quarter, you had that one lady who ran out on the court. She was some animal rights protester or something, and she was trying to glue herself to the floor. It's what is going on here? It was just kind of wild, and it was a great, last 8 minutes of the game. But despite Karl Anthony Towns laying the biggest egg I've ever seen a center lay in a big game in a while, Cat was awful. The Timberwolves ended up winning the game, led by Anthony Edwards, who was just spectacular. Edwards dropped 30 points, 10 for 21 from the field, and 5 for 11 from three. So a relatively efficient game from him, scoring 30 and leading the way. The Clippers bigs could not stop him when he was driving to the basket. He's such an athletic player. But after the game, after the final buzzer sounds, Patrick Beverley runs from the opposite corner to the scores table, jumps up on the scores table like he hit a buzzer beater. He's firing at the crowd. Yeah, let's go. He, takes off his jersey, throws it out into the crowd, and he even was shedding tears. He was so emotional, and it really did. It honestly, it looked like the Timberwolves had just won the championship, because you have Patrick Beverley in tears, throwing his jersey in the crowd. Anthony Edwards went right up there with him to celebrate. Karl Anthony Towns, again, after playing like straight garbage, and I love Karl Anthony Towns, love the man, but he was terrible. He's kissing his girlfriend after the game, and they're hugging. Everybody's celebrating. It's like, dang, was that the playoffs or But everybody's kind of playful. I think it's playfully for the most part. We can all, joke and have fun on social media. Everybody's kind of playfully, making fun of Patrick Beverley for his celebration. But I love it, because I've always said in sports, I've always said this, is if you're going to talk smack, back it up. Back it up. Because my thing is, if you say something, if you make a big proclamation, we're going to beat this team, or I'm going to do this, or I am this, or we are this. And if you back it up, I can't say anything wrong or bad about you. Why would I? Well, it's cocky, it's arrogant. Is it correct? All I care about is it correct or not, And Patrick Beverley, first of all, he said this during the media day for the Timberwolves back in September or whenever it was, September, early October. He said, we're going to make the playoffs. It was like, no, you're not. Maybe you'll push for the play-in tournament. I know my man John in our NBA prediction special, I'm pretty sure he had the Timberwolves in the play-in tournament, but I don't think anybody really looked at Minnesota as a team that could actually get in. But they did, of course. They were the 7 seed. I think we're 3 games better than the Clippers this regular season. Beat them out in the play-in game, winning a home game, and now they're in the playoffs taking on the Memphis Grizzlies. But I will say this about Patrick Beverley, because he gets on my nerves a lot. But credit to him, because from his perspective, he's saying, okay, and he even said in his own words, I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that organization, talking about the LA Clippers. He was there for 4 years, would always take, even at 6 feet 1 inch tall, he would take LeBron, he would take Kevin Durant, he would take guys basically a foot taller than him and give them fits in terms of frustrating them, right? He couldn't stop them. Patrick Beverley's not stopping anybody, or at least any great player, I should say. But getting their head a little bit, right? Remember, he had that big block on LeBron on Christmas Day. It was probably the best defensive play of Patrick Beverley's career. It was a phenomenal defensive play. If you don't remember, the Lakers are down 3 on Christmas. The clock's winding down. LeBron's got to get up a 3 to try and tie it. So he goes up, and Patrick Beverley blocks his shot, and he blocks it off of LeBron's right hand. It goes out of bounds. Clippers basketball. Game over. Merry Christmas. And so from his perspective, he's saying, I've given everything I've had to this organization. I was a big reason that we got to the Western Conference Finals undermanned. Like that Clippers team, y'all remember, was just beat up, starting, of course, with Kawhi Leonard on down. That was a beat-up Clippers team, and Patrick Beverley was a big contributor in getting them to the Western Conference Finals. So it was a surprise to a lot of people, like, wait a second, the Clippers are moving off him? He's a solid three-point shooter. He's not a true point guard in any way, but he's an excellent defensive player. I'm kind of surprised they let him go. But he goes to Minnesota, and I think in a lot of ways he helped sort of change that culture a bit. I really do think that because, Jimmy Butler, remember Jimmy Butler left in 2018? Remember he called Andrew Wiggins, Karl-Anthony Towns, he said, y'all soft, and was saying other things that I definitely cannot repeat on this show. This is a family show. And Jimmy Butler said some things that cannot be said on a family show to Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. And so you have a guy like Patrick Beverley, who, just like Jimmy Butler, obviously is not as good as Jimmy, but he's a no BS guy. He's a grinder, right? He puts the work in. This is a guy who was overlooked in high school, overlooked in college, had to go play overseas for a little bit, got an opportunity with the Houston Rockets, and has stayed in the league ever since. He deserves a ton of credit for that. But that's who he is. And so when he sees guys starting with Karl-Anthony Towns, going down to Anthony Edwards, to D'Angelo Russell, like they were talking about during the game last night, like Anthony Edwards last year, his rookie year, he had a great rookie season, but he was abysmal on the defensive end of the floor, like played no defense. This year, he's all bought into the defensive end of the floor. I think Patrick Beverley has a lot to do with that. So yeah, I mean, I think if the Timberwolves are playing, let's say the Timberwolves were playing the Spurs in the play-in game, Patrick Beverley does not celebrate like that. Of course, he's excited. Minnesota's excited. They should be excited. They haven't had a ton to cheer for in terms of their basketball team. So, good on them. Let them have this moment. Matter of fact, I think TNT played the One Shining Moment song like they'd won the championship. But, Patrick Beverley is a big contributor to that. And he's saying, hey, Clippers, could have used me. And that's a sign of Pat Bev loved the Clippers. He loved the organization. I'm sure he loved Ty Lue. And guys like Paul George, Kawhi, everybody else, Reggie Jackson, Nick Batum, and Terrence Mann, and everybody. He loved that team. He enjoyed his time there. And so the fact that they did move on from him hurt. So I'm actually, I know JJ Redick talked about that earlier. I'm on Pat Bev's side on this. Because, listen, because there's a way we can all relate to this. We've all been overlooked. And if we have gotten the opportunity to sort of have a little bit of vindication, it feels really good. I always say vindication is intoxicating. If it is as good of a feeling as you could have. And Patrick Beverley felt that and then some. He felt that on an even bigger level. Because an NBA team moved off him, he went to another team and beat the team that moved off him in the play-in tournament and has put them on the brink of elimination while he's back in the playoffs. They're worried about getting in the playoffs. He's in the playoffs. So I love the celebration. Loved it. Good for Minnesota because, obviously the Timberwolves aren't winning a championship, but this is a young core that, you can build around for the future. Like Minnesota can be a team that maybe in 2-3 years can contend. Chris Finch has done a really good job there. He just got an extension. Karl-Anthony Towns has got to play better than he did in the play-in game. But the Ant-Man, he's great. D'Angelo Russell is a solid scorer, excellent three-point shooter. You got guys like Pat Bev and Vanderbilt. This is a solid roster that they've got in Minnesota, and definitely one that I think can give Memphis some problems. I still would definitely take Memphis, but don't sleep on the Timberwolves. It's funny. I think both Shaq and Charles Barkley after the game picked the Timberwolves, which surprised me a bit. Like, I don't know. I just don't think they. I mean, when you've got a Memphis team that lost, like John Morant missed 20+ games and the Grizzlies lost like 3, that's elite coaching and that's a solid roster. It's a great defensive team, 3-point shooting team, the whole bit, and they're great at home. Like I just can't see in a 7-game series. For a game, sure. Maybe even 2 games. I can't see in a 7-game series the Timberwolves knocking off the Memphis Grizzlies. But hey, crazier things have happened. And so now we move on. Final topic of the day. I did this for the NFL playoff teams back in January. Because I said, okay, no NFL team is perfect. There's going to be a reason. There's going to be a glaring reason that everybody is going to point to with that specific team why they didn't win the Super Bowl, why they didn't win their playoff game. And so I decided to do it again, but this time for the NBA playoffs. So what we're doing is the 7 teams out west, the 7 teams out east that are already etched in stone in the playoffs. Of course, we all know there's one spot in the east to be determined. Either Cleveland or Atlanta will get in. And then in the west, one spot to be determined. Either the Clippers or the Pelicans will get in. So, but I'll include those 4 teams. Of course, 2 of them will not get in the playoffs, but I'll include all 4 of those teams along with the other 14 teams that are already in the playoffs. So 18 teams in total. What is the number one weakness that they have that could prove fatal in them trying to go win a championship? Of course, not everybody is a championship contender, but certainly, there's reasons that you won't get there. So here we go. We got the music going. Let's start with the Atlanta Hawks. Doesn't have enough length defensively. I think the John Collins loss is bigger than people are giving it credit for. Reportedly, he's going to be out possibly until the second round if the Hawks can somehow get there. But when you look at Atlanta, they have improved defensively under Nate McMillan. Like, their defense is what got them, or what helped get them to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. But, Trae Young does not give you anything defensively. Certainly in one-on-one situations. Neither does Bogdanovic. Gallinari doesn't give you much defensively. Kevin Huerter gives you nothing defensively. And so, Clint Capella is the only guy who's a great shot blocker. But outside of that, with the loss of Collins, that also hurts you in the rebounding department. And if the Hawks beat the Cavs, they're going to have to play the Miami Heat. And that's a tough, physical team. They do a great job. I think the Heat were the best team in the league in three-point shooting. That's going to give the Hawks a lot of problems. So their length, I think, will cost them when it's all said and done. So the Cleveland Cavaliers, if they get in the playoffs, not enough shot makers down the stretch of close basketball games. And so, for the Cavs, they're sort of in the middle of the pack in three-point shooting as a team, but they don't have anybody that shoots 40% from three. We know what Darius Garland brings to the table. He averages 21 points a game. He's an emerging star player. He was an all-star this season. Jared Allen, also an all-star this year, but obviously he's not a scorer. He's a defensive presence and a great rebounder. And so are you going to rely on guys like Lauri Markkanen and obviously, Colin Sexton's, been up and down. Rajon Rondo, he's not playoff Rondo anymore. Kevin Love's the only guy on this roster that I can consistently count on to knock down a three-point shot. And Kevin Love isn't going to play big minutes. He's coming off the bench now this season with the Cavs. So I think the lack of a score outside of Garland is going to hurt them at the very end. Because if the Cavs would also play the Heat, you're going to need scores to try and get past that Heat defense. And I think that's just going to be too much for Cleveland. Now moving on to the guaranteed playoff teams in the Eastern Conference. So the Brooklyn Nets, who everybody loves. Supporting cast is hit and miss, and so is the defense. Obviously, we know Blake Griffin's out of the rotation. Andre Drummond has never performed well in the postseason. Well, like I told y'all, Seth Curry has just been abysmal the last few games. Now, he's a Curry, so he'll get that shot going, pretty soon. But what guy's going to show up? You're not sure. And then you got the Ben Simmons component onto it. He would help solve the problem of defense, but offensively, like I mentioned earlier, Steve Nash would have to completely change his offensive philosophy in order to suit Ben Simmons' addition into the starting five, and I just don't think that's going to be enough time for the Nets to be able to adjust and possibly, go further. They're further than I think they will in the postseason, so that's their weakness. Going to the Chicago Bulls now, who got off to a great start during the season. Inability to beat championship-level teams. They have flat out stunk against the best teams in the NBA. Against the top 3 seeds in the Eastern Conference and in the Western Conference combined. So in the East, 1 through 3, Miami, Boston, Milwaukee. In the West, Phoenix, Memphis, Golden State. You know what the Bulls' record is against those 6 teams combined? 1-16. That, Lonzo Ball's out. They've played really bad basketball since the All-Star break. I love DeMar DeRozan. What he's done this season, he's been unbelievable. Zach LaVine's fell off a little bit. Vucevic has not been what I thought he would be in his first full season in a Chicago Bulls uniform. I love Billy Donovan. He's one of my favorite coaches in the league. But I just think the Bulls go in the playoffs with no momentum, playing a team like Milwaukee. This could possibly be the only sweep of the first round. Moving on to the Toronto Raptors, the champions from 2019. They're just too young. Too young to win a title. They're the second youngest team in the playoffs. And the youngest team I talked about this with the Lakers being too old. The Raptors are too young. The youngest team to win a title in terms of their average age in the last decade was the 2015 Golden State Warriors. The average age on that team was 28. The average age of the Raptors is 25. I mean, you've got young players. You've got Precious Achiuwa, and you got Scotty Barnes, who very well may be the rookie of the year. Pascal Siakam's a veteran. Fred VanVleet, he's a veteran. But this is a very, very young basketball team. OG Anunoby's still young. So it's a young basketball team. I think that's going to hurt them in the long run against a team like Philadelphia. It could be a 7-game series. Toronto may very well even win. But in terms of trying to go win a championship, they're just too young to go, hoist the Larry O'Brien trophy for the second time in 4 seasons. Moving on to the team I just mentioned that the Raptors are playing, the Philadelphia 76ers. Doc Rivers in the playoffs. James Harden in the playoffs. I think that speaks in and of itself. I think it speaks for itself. Doc Rivers, the only coach in NBA history to blow 3 series in which he had a 3-1 lead. James Harden, won't go into all of it today, but he was bad in the 2015 playoffs. He was bad in the 2017 playoffs. He was bad in the 2018 playoffs. He was bad in the 2019 playoffs. He was bad in last season's playoffs. Why do I think that's going to change? Sorry, Philadelphia. Not sorry. It ain't changing. And by the way, does Embiid stay healthy? And it's not a particularly deep roster. They gave up, obviously, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond. So they gave up a lot of depth in order to get James Harden. He's going to have games where he scores a lot of points and dishes out a lot of assists. He doesn't have the same explosiveness. He's not as effective as a shot maker in recent games. He's shooting around 30% in the last couple of weeks. He's been terrible. And, it's kind of like the Chicago Bulls. Not going into the playoffs with any momentum at all. And Doc Rivers, James Harden, it's as simple as that. That is why the 76ers will not win a championship. Moving on to the team that I think I've said, since the preseason, I think is going to get back to the finals. The defending champion Milwaukee Bucks. What is their weakness? Same thing it was last year. Budenholzer's inability to adjust. I complained about this all playoffs long. It drove me up a wall. Mike Budenholzer, the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. Let's keep in mind, folks, this is the same Mike Budenholzer that we all talked about. Remember, if the Nets had beaten the Bucks in the second round, Mike Budenholzer gets fired. Instead, they win the championship, and he gets an extension. You're talking about a guy who got out-coached by Steve Nash in spurts in the second round, which that cannot happen again for the Bucks. They survived by this, the skin of their teeth to beat the Nets last year. When you look at letting some of the best scorers in the world, Kevin Durant, Trae Young in the Eastern Conference Finals go crazy on you. You got to pick up on those little things, and I think that's going to hurt the Bucks in the long run. Mike Budenholzer, I think, would be the number one thing that would hold this Bucks team back. Outside of that, I think this team's going to make the finals for the second straight year. The Boston Celtics, little interior presence. Robert Williams, we know the story. He's out possibly until the Eastern Conference Finals if the Celtics even get him back before then. And that's going to hurt them. Because, obviously, if you have a guy in Kyrie Irving who loves to drive to the rim, I always said about Kyrie, he's the best finisher, non-dunking finisher in the NBA. And then you got Kevin Durant who can get to the rim at will. Okay, let's say they survive that series. The heck you going to do to stop Giannis? Okay, let's say he gets to the Eastern Conference Finals. The heck you going to do to stop Embiid? Now, Robert Williams might be back by that point, but he'll be hobbled. What are you going to do to stop Joel Embiid? So, I love the Celtics' perimeter scoring and perimeter defense. Again, number one defense in the NBA this season. But I think the fact that they don't have Robert Williams, the interior pressure, is going to hurt them in the long run. So that is my weakness for the Boston Celtics. Our last team in the East, the number one seed in the Eastern Conference, the Miami Heat. Can't win a championship without a superstar. You can't. And I was somebody who had bought into the Jimmy Butler superstar hype a couple of years ago when he had the run that he had in the bubble. But this is a guy that hasn't made that many all-star teams, isn't really a pure scorer in any sense of the word. You know, he's a below-average three-point shooter. You know, he's not a great driver to the basket. He's got a mean step-back mid-range jumper. But, you know, are we sure that he's the best scorer in his own team? I think that's Tyler Hero. I mean, at times, Kyle Lowry, even in his advanced age, is a better scorer than Jimmy Butler. I think the Heat do not have a superstar. That's going to hurt them in the long run. I mean, look, we all kind of have the consistency. You got to have, bare minimum, you got to have one superstar, maybe two. Like, there's a few exceptions to that rule, like Milwaukee. Chris Middleton's not a superstar, but he's a star. Like, I feel like the Heat have a group of stars, Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, but, excuse me, even Victor Oladipo, when he's at his best, can give you, some good minutes. But what does a collective group, matter if you don't have that guy that can kind of carry you? And I'm not sure Jimmy Butler can do just that. Let's move on to the Western Conference. I called it for years the Bestern Conference. It's not that anymore, but it's still got its fair share of good playoff teams. The New Orleans Pelicans, do they get in? Do they not? We'll find out tomorrow night. But what is their weakness? Lack of a true point guard. And I feel like nobody's really brought this up with the Pelicans. Their assist leader is what's his name? Devontae Graham. My bad. Played for Charlotte last year. Played with the Pelicans this year. He averaged only 4 assists a game. So right now their starting point guard is CJ McCollum. CJ's not really a point guard. Like, he's always been a 2 his whole career. He still plays like a 2. In New Orleans, he's just listed as the point guard. And so I think the inability of, they don't have a guy who can control the pace. Pace is everything. It doesn't mean that much in the regular season. It's everything in the playoffs. And the fact that the Pelicans don't have that, even if they get in the postseason, I can't see them winning a single game off the Phoenix Suns. I just can't, because that's who they would play. The Los Angeles Clippers, do they get in the playoffs? We will see. No Kawhi, no chance. I think that speaks for itself. Paul George won me over last postseason with how he played once Kawhi went down. You got guys like, Reggie Jackson, who was Mr. June last year. He plays big in the playoffs. Norman Powell is an NBA champion from the Raptors in 2019. He's a good player in the playoffs, especially in the defensive end, and he's improved his offensive game likewise. But I think when you don't have, I love Paul George, but I don't think he's a superstar. And so it kind of goes back to that Miami Heat theory. Like, the Clippers are a lot like the Heat. Well-coached, great defense, good supporting cast, but do you have the alpha dog? The Clippers do have the alpha dog. He's just not healthy. And I think, like Ben Simmons, I think it'd be a mistake to throw Kawhi out there in the playoffs. So the Clippers, that is their biggest weakness. No Kawhi, no chance. The Minnesota Timberwolves, who I defended like crazy just a few minutes ago, Cat, don't attack. Cat, what's up? You're the third best center in the National Basketball Association. Back to the basket. Back dudes down. Dunk on their heads. Play like Joel Embiid because you can. But oftentimes he's been relegated to just a perimeter player. I don't think Karl-Anthony Towns loves all that contact. He don't want that smoke down low. And so I think that's going to be the Achilles heel for the Minnesota Timberwolves this season. Again, love Anthony Edwards. Wasn't that high on him out of the draft. Love him now that I've seen in the NBA. Patrick Beverley is going to give them an edge, no question about it. He's going to match everything that Memphis brings at them. D'Angelo Russell, what does he do in his second playoff go-around? He wasn't so great in Brooklyn. He was getting benched in the fourth quarter. But if Cat doesn't do what Cat's supposed to do, Timberwolves they don't have a prayer's chance at an upset in the second round. So that's their weakness. The team that my team is playing in the first round, the Denver Nuggets. What's their issue? What's their weakness? Jokic or bust. In the postseason, we all know with Jokic, it's bust. Add to the fact that Jamal Murray is out. Will Barton is out. So the Nuggets are not deep. They're not great defensively. What the Warriors are going to do is they're going to make Nikola Jokic a scorer. Don't make him a scorer and a distributor, or you could get in some big trouble. And so I think the Warriors are going to let Jokic get his 30, 31 points, but relegate him to 5-6 assists at most. And I think that's what Steve Kerr, the Warriors, Draymond Green's definitely going to have some input on that. That's what they're going to do. It's Jokic or bust. I mean, that's Denver's not a deep team. They're not a team that can win a playoff series. Moving on to the Utah Jazz. Supporting cast has a history of underperforming in the playoffs. This is really the story of the Utah Jazz in the history of their franchise. Donovan Mitchell is great in the playoffs. Every playoff run, look at his numbers. He's averaging over 30. His shooting percentages are great. But what do you get from, as like I said, Shaq says all the time, the others? What do you get from Bogdanovich? What do you get from Jordan Clarkson? Jordan Clarkson has had some bad playoff moments. Jordan Clarkson is the modern day J.R. Smith. It ain't just because of the tattoos. He takes some horrible shots, doesn't make them the postseason. And what you gonna do, to quote my man Barry Grant Jr. about Rudy Gobert? What are you going to do? He's an offensive liability. Now, he has improved his free throw shooting, which helps him a bit if they want to go hack a Gobert or whatever, if the opposition wants to go hack a Gobert. But he has oftentimes been exposed for the Defensive Player of the Year that he is not in the postseason. So really, in many ways, the Jazz are like the Nuggets. It's kind of Donovan Mitchell or bust. And Mike Conley, love him. He tends to struggle to stay healthy in the playoffs. And so I think that's going to hurt the Jazz in the long run. Moving on to the Dallas Mavericks. Biggest obstacle is Luka's calf. Luka Doncic, a strained left calf muscle. Reportedly, he will miss game 1 of the series. Best case, if everything goes perfectly, he plays game 2. He's going to be limited. We know Luka these last couple of postseasons has just been spectacular. Both series coming against a great defensive team in the LA Clippers. I would have absolutely taken Dallas to win this series, probably in 5 games if Luka was healthy. Now I'm not sure they take more than 2 games off the Utah Jazz. Question is, do the Jazz blow it? Because the Jazz should win this series now that Luka's out. But I bought into the Mavericks as a possible championship contender because of their improvement on defense, because of how Luka is playing, and how Spencer Dinwiddie is playing as well since he was traded from Washington. But if Luka's less than 85%, they're not winning a playoff series. Moving on to my team, the team that I think is going to hoist the Larry O'Brien Trophy this June, the Golden State Warriors. What is their biggest weakness? Are the big 3 healthy? Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, they have played a grand total all season long of 11 minutes. Not even a full quarter together. Now, reportedly, Steph Curry is on track to play game 1, so clearly he's healthy enough to go. Can they stay healthy? Because it seems like every time one of them comes back from injury, one of the others goes down. Because when Klay Thompson made his ceremonious return, guess what happened? Draymond Green had just gotten hurt right before that. And then Draymond finally comes back in late March, and Steph goes down. So it's like, cross your fingers that, Klay or Draymond don't go down in game 1 or game 2. If those 3 are healthy, listen to this. The Golden State Warriors, in the games, in the series in which Draymond, Steph, and Klay have started every game in the series, they've never lost. They've never lost a playoff series in which all 3 of those guys have started every game. So the question for the Warriors is, are they going to be healthy or not? Moving on to the Memphis Grizzlies. What's their biggest weakness? Just not ready yet. I've been on this Memphis Grizzlies, train for a year now. I was first on this a year ago. When they beat my Warriors to get in the postseason, I'm like, that team's going places. They got a superstar point guard in Ja Morant. They've got a phenomenal head coach in Taylor Jenkins. And they've got a roster, Desmond Bane. Steven Adams is a seasoned vet. Jaren Jackson might be the defensive player of the year. I mean, they're unbelievable at home. They're a great 3-point shooting team. This team's going to give people problems in the postseason. I just don't think they have enough to beat Golden State and to beat Phoenix. And speaking of those Phoenix, but again, about Memphis, their time's going to come. I just don't think it's this year. Moving on to the team that I think is the best team in basketball right now, and I don't think anybody debates that, the Phoenix Suns. What's their weakness? It's really a question. Does CP3's body hold up? I mean, it's like every year, it's something. And as Chris Paul has advanced in his age, the injuries are coming with greater regularity. Is it his finger? Is it his shoulder? Is it his knee? Last year, he got COVID. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen to him or anybody this postseason. Does Chris Paul stay healthy? And so that's really it for the Suns. I mean, they're the one of the best defensive teams in the league. They're a great three-point shooting team. Monty Williams just might be the best coach in the National Basketball Association. Does Chris Paul's body hold up? That's the question. So that's my weaknesses for all 18 playoff teams. Well, there's actually going to be 16, but 18 possible, championship teams. Although we all know all 18 teams that got a shot to win the championship. It's really like 6 at best. But there you go. NBA playoff weaknesses. That's what it is. All right. Appreciate everybody stopping by as always. That is all the time we have for today's show. Be sure to catch Carving Up Live tomorrow, as always, at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. Be sure to catch the Carving Up podcast as well on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, Anchor, as well as wherever you listen to your podcast. Be sure to check out Carving It Up as well on social media. Instagram at Carving It Up Podcast, Twitter at Carving It Up Pod, and Facebook, Bryson Carver. Just search Bryson Carver and the Carving Up logo. You know what it looks like right here. If you're watching YouTube, it's right down there. It should look like that, and you can watch the show on Facebook or check the show out on Facebook. Also, last thing before we go, episode 2. We're on episode 2 of the Carving It Up U.S. Presence Edition. It will be available here's the logo for the YouTube audience. We're going to be covering 6 presidents, so it's going to be, it's going to be a lot. If you want to get your nice dose of American history, just wake up Saturday morning. It'll be available 7 a.m. Eastern, 4 a.m. Pacific time on our normal podcasting platforms. Wake up in the morning. If you're going to work, on Saturday, just, turn on your phone, listen to it on the drive to work. If you're not going to work, great. Turn it on, eat some breakfast. And I think y'all enjoy it. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback from episode 1. So I definitely think if you guys liked episode 1, episode 2 is, I promise you, even better. So be sure to check it out on Saturday. Have a great week. We're going to see y'all tomorrow. Have a great evening, everybody. Stay safe out there. God bless you all. Peace out. Y'all gonna win the championship. Let's go. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.